What might it feel like to stroll through the year 1923? Imagine a world lit by soft lamps and early neon signs where gramophones hum gently in parlours and steam trains sigh across the countryside. The air is filled with a quiet mixture of tradition and change as people everywhere step into a new chapter of the still young century. Welcome, dear listener. I am Toro, and tonight I invite you to drift back with me into the year 1923. Let the worries of today rest quietly at the edge of your pillow as we wander through a time nearly 100 years past. The world then was healing, still adjusting after the Great War, but also blooming with new hopes, inventions, and small joys that filled everyday life. The year 1923 was not a time of loud triumphs or sudden upheavals, but rather of slow rebuilding, gentle discoveries, and cultural blossoms that would ripple into the decades ahead. The glow of cinema began to brighten city streets, new novels carried readers away to distant places, and everyday families found comfort in the warmth of their routines, from shared meals to simple games played on wooden floors. As you listen, imagine the soft shuffle of shoes on cobblestones, the rustle of newspapers fresh from the press, and the laughter of children echoing in quiet courtyards. Tonight, let us explore the world of 1923 together, softly, calmly, like a gentle walk through a memory. World events. The year 1923 unfolded like a patchwork quilt, stitched together from events across continents, each piece carrying its own shade of history. In Europe, Germany faced a particularly heavy chapter. The country struggled under the weight of reparations from the First World War. That year, France and Belgium sent troops into the Ruhr Valley, a coal-rich industrial region, to ensure payments were met. Factories slowed, and German workers went on strike in protest. Out of this came a different kind of headline. The German mark, their currency, fell into one of history's most famous hyperinflations. By the autumn of 1923, prices spiraled so quickly that wages were collected in wheelbarrows of notes, and a loaf of bread might cost millions. Yet through this hardship, families still found ways to endure, leaning on one another and sharing laughter at kitchen tables, even as money lost its meaning. Elsewhere, in the Eastern Mediterranean, a young republic declared itself. In October of 1923, Turkey was officially proclaimed, with Mustafa Kemal Ataturk as its first president. The Ottoman Empire, a centuries-old presence, gave way to a modern state that sought to balance tradition with sweeping change. Across Anatolia, new schools opened and conversations buzzed with the promise of a new national identity. Across the Atlantic, in the United States, a quieter political scene unfolded. President Warren G. Harding passed away unexpectedly in August of 1923 while on a trip to San Francisco. His vice president, Calvin Coolidge, took the oath of office by the light of a kerosene lamp in his family home in Vermont. A gentle, almost rustic scene that contrasted with the vast responsibilities awaiting him. Coolidge would be remembered for his calm, measured demeanor, a stillness that mirrored the quiet yearning for stability in the nation. Meanwhile, in Japan, nature reminded the world of its power. On September 1st, the Great Kanto earthquake struck the Tokyo and Yokohama regions. In moments, the ground shook violently and fires spread quickly through wooden neighborhoods. Though thousands of lives were lost, the rebuilding that followed brought changes in architecture, city planning, and resilience. Out of the sorrow, seeds of renewal were planted. In Britain, 1923 was marked by politics carried out in hushed tones rather than shouts. A general election in December brought the first Labour government with Ramsay as Prime Minister. It was a short-lived administration, but the shift hinted at a new era where voices of workers and unions carried more weight in the halls of Westminster. As we move through these events, imagine them not as distant headlines, but as small lanterns of human experience glowing in the night, guiding us softly through the year. Daily life around the world. While governments debated and economies shifted, daily life in 1923 was woven from the simple threads of routine. Picture a morning in a small American town. Milk bottles clink at doorsteps left by the milkman's cart pulled by a gentle horse. Radios are still rare, so families gather around newspapers for the latest stories. Breakfast might be oatmeal with sugar or eggs fried in a cast-iron pan, accompanied by coffee poured from a metal pot. Clothing reflected both tradition and fashion's new boldness. Men wore suits with high-waisted trousers and flat caps for work, while women, especially in cities, began to embrace the flapper style. Shorter hemlines, cloche hats, and bobbed hair that swung lightly with movement. In the countryside, though, dresses remained longer, and aprons were tied snugly for daily chores. Children filled their days with games that needed little more than imagination. Marbles clicked against cobblestones, hoops rolled down lanes, and jump ropes slapped rhythmically against pavement. In colder climates, sleds were pulled across frosted hills, laughter echoing in the crisp air. Meals carried both comfort and simplicity. In Europe, soups and stews stretched to feed whole families, while in America, diners began serving hamburgers and pies to a growing car-traveling public. The icebox, cooled with large blocks of ice delivered by wagon, was a fixture in many kitchens. Travel was steadily changing. While horse-drawn carts still clattered in villages, automobiles were becoming more common in cities. The Ford Model T was a familiar sight, sputtering cheerfully along dusty roads. Long-distance travel often meant boarding a train, a rhythmic, soothing journey marked by the clatter of wheels and the hiss of steam. For those with means, ships carried passengers across oceans, their decks lined with deck chairs where travelers sipped tea and watched the waves. Evenings were filled with both work and leisure. Families might gather around a gramophone, its brass horn spreading the warm crackle of jazz or dance tunes into living rooms. Candlelight still glowed in rural homes, while cities grew brighter under electric lamps. Life was not without hardship. In Germany, the hyperinflation meant that wages, even when paid daily, lost value before they could be spent. Families bartered goods, sewing clothes from old fabrics, baking bread with whatever ingredients were available. Yet even in those difficult times, birthdays were celebrated with homemade cakes, and stories were told by firelight, reminding everyone that joy could be found in small, steadfast traditions. From bustling New York streets to quiet Japanese villages rebuilding after disaster, 1923 was a year carried on the shoulders of ordinary people, their laughter, worries, and hopes shaping the rhythm of the world. Science, inventions, and technology. The early 1920s were years of curiosity, as discoveries slowly shifted from laboratories into daily life. In medicine, researchers were refining the use of insulin, discovered just the year before, to treat diabetes. Families who once feared the illness as a quiet death sentence now found new hope in small glass vials. Air travel was beginning to feel less like a dream and more like a reality. In 1923, the first non-stop transcontinental flight across the United States was achieved, though the journey was long and required daring pilots to push the limits of their machines. Meanwhile, airships, with their graceful shapes drifting across the sky, inspired awe in those who tilted their heads upward to watch. The year also saw steps in communication. While telephones were still far from universal, they spread steadily into homes and offices. The sound of a bell ringing and the soft crackle of a distant voice brought both wonder and connection. In energy, hydroelectric plants expanded, their turbines spinning with the flow of rivers, bringing light to communities far from coal mines. Electricity was not yet everywhere, but where it reached, it transformed nights into brighter hours and allowed radios and appliances to hum gently into life. In everyday technology, cameras became more affordable, allowing families to capture small moments on film. Birthdays, picnics, and smiling faces frozen in sepia tones. These innovations, though small in the grand sweep of history, carried with them a sense of wonder, a whisper that the future might be brighter, faster, and more connected. Culture and the arts. Culture in 1923 shimmered with creativity. In literature, Virginia Woolf published Jacob's Room, a novel that explored memory and perspective in ways that felt fresh and deeply human. Across the ocean, Willa Cather released A Lost Lady, a quiet story of change in the American frontier. And in the world of poetry, Khalil Gibran's The Prophet gained readers with its lyrical meditations on love, work, and freedom, words that continue to inspire to this day. On screen, silent films drew crowds into theaters. Stars like Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton made audiences laugh and marvel, while dramatic films offered escape into exotic adventures or heart-stirring romances. Movie palaces, with their ornate interiors and glowing marquees, were becoming beloved landmarks in cities worldwide. Music pulsed with jazz, the rhythm of the age. In Harlem, New York, musicians like Louis Armstrong carried lively melodies into nightclubs where couples danced beneath smoke-filled ceilings. At the same time, classical composers continued their work, Bela Bartok weaving Hungarian folk themes into orchestras, and Jean Sibelius offering symphonies that carried listeners into landscapes of sound. Sports, too, offered inspiration. In America, baseball thrived, with Babe Ruth hitting home runs that echoed across stadiums. In Europe, football, what many today call soccer, drew crowds to muddy fields where local pride ran high. Art shifted with modernism. Painters experimented with shapes, colors, and abstract forms, while traditional artists captured serene portraits and landscapes. Galleries displayed both, inviting quiet contemplation and spirited debate. Culture. In 1923, in all its forms, was about expression, laughter, music, and art offering comfort, joy, and meaning in a world still finding its balance. Media and headlines. In 1923, the way people received their news was changing. Newspapers remained the heartbeat of information. Headlines arrived with the morning delivery, folded crisply and carrying the scent of fresh ink. Families gathered around breakfast tables, scanning stories both grave and light. In Germany, papers chronicled the dizzying fall of the mark, reporting bread at millions of marks one week and billions the next. In Britain, the December election earned headlines like "Labour forms government for the first time." In the United States, readers saw updates such as Coolidge sworn in by lamplight after Harding's sudden passing. Lighter stories filled the pages too. Society notes, tales of explorers, and even reports of curious inventions like mechanical toasters and talking machines. Magazines brought culture into homes. Time magazine, in fact, was founded in 1923, its very first issue arriving in March. Short, concise articles allowed readers to feel informed without wading through endless columns of text. Prices carried meaning too. A loaf of bread in America cost around 9 cents, while a gallon of gasoline averaged 22 cents. For many, these numbers were part of everyday conversation, shaping how families planned their budgets. And though radios were just beginning to spread where they existed, they brought voices into living rooms, voices that sounded almost magical, as if the world itself was speaking gently through the air. People born, died, this year. Every year brings both arrivals and farewells, and 1923 was no different. Among those born were figures who would one day shape art and imagination. Richard Attenborough, who would go on to become a beloved actor and filmmaker, was born in August. Charlton Heston, another future actor, arrived in October. In the world of literature, Norman Mailer was born in January, his pen destined to craft stories of the mid-century. Musical voices also entered the world that year, including Hank Williams, whose songs would one day echo across country roads and radios with heartfelt twang. As for farewells, 1923 marked the passing of Warren G. Harding, President of the United States, whose quiet leadership ended abruptly in August. In literature, the world said goodbye to Catherine Pyle, an American author and illustrator of children's stories, whose gentle tales had brought comfort to many. These births and deaths woven together remind us of the continuous flow of generations, voices rising as others gently fade. As the year 1923 drew to a close, the world carried both scars and new blossoms. In Germany, inflation began to settle with the introduction of a new currency, the Rentenmark, restoring a fragile sense of stability. In Turkey, a republic stood ready to shape its destiny. In Japan, rebuilding continued with determination after the earthquake's devastation. In homes across continents, people looked toward 1924 with cautious hope. Children fell asleep to the soft sound of lullabies, parents whispered plans for the year ahead, and communities marked the change of calendar with quiet celebrations. 1923 may not shine as the brightest star in history's sky, but it glows warmly as a year of persistence, renewal, and everyday humanity. It reminds us that history is not only grand battles and treaties, but also the quiet resilience of people carrying on, cooking meals, telling stories, laughing with neighbors, and finding joy in music and books. As we leave this year behind, imagine yourself stepping gently out of 1923's cobblestone streets, the lamplight fading softly behind you, and carrying with you the sense of calm continuity that binds one year to the next. Thank you for joining me, dear listener, on this gentle journey through the world of 1923. I hope its quiet stories and subtle details have guided you toward rest, wrapping you in the warmth of another time. If you enjoyed this journey, I invite you softly to like this video, to subscribe, and to continue wandering through history with me in nights to come. Until we meet again, may your dreams be peaceful, your rest deep, and your heart light. Good night, and sleep well.